If you think that you've got any addictions or behaviours that you want to get rid of, then watch the video, because I guarantee by the end of it you'll realise at least a small nugget that you can take away and apply and think, okay, this is what's been holding me back, right? So let's talk about it. Addictive behaviours, habits, things that are holding you back that you want to get rid of. What's the basic understanding behind it? I want to talk about the pleasure-pain balance, right? And within that, the first thing I want to touch on is dopamine. It's a molecule that's released when you're predicting a behaviour or predicting the reward of behaviour. Right, so over here, there's a list of activities, right? We've got exercise, working, walking, food, drugs, porn, cigs, social media. Now, the faster and more dopamine is released from an activity, the more addictive and stronger you'll be wanting to do that more. So if you give an example here, exercising and walking and working and shit, dopamine released in the initial stage is a lot less compared to food, like junk food, drugs, porn, cigs and socials. Now I want you to keep that there and keep that in mind, right? Because that's very important. Let's talk about the pleasure-pain balance. Now, the areas where pleasure and pain are in your brain are basically co-located, so they basically overlap. So that means that everything here works in a sort of seesaw fashion. So the goal of everything is balance. So let's just say your pleasure-pain pathway is balanced right now, and then you decide to have a burger, right? You decide to have a greasy-ass burger. What will happen is the balance tips towards the side of pleasure. So now you're in the pleasure state. But like I mentioned, the goal is balance. So what that means is you want to go naturally, homeostasis. Balance means that you go back to normal. Now, I want you to imagine on the side of pain that you've got these little gremlins, these little goblins that are always trying to pull the seesaw back down towards the side of pain. Just keep that analogy in your mind because it will make a lot of sense. Now, every time you have something, one of those lists, for example, pleasurable, these goblins will jump on this side here, and what they'll essentially do is pull that down, right? But they won't pull it down to where it was balanced here. This is like balance, no. What they do is they pull it further down. Why? Because every action has the equal and opposite reaction. So if you've done 80% of pleasure really, really fast, then what the goblins will do is pull that straight back down to 80% of pain really, really fast. Now this is important when we look at the type of activities that we're doing, right? The reason you feel like shit, for example, after watching porn is because of that. It's a very, very high dopamine releasing activity. So the tilt is fast towards dopamine, and equally the goblins will pull that back to the other side, so you feel an 80% feeling of negativity straight afterwards. Now that could be eating your burger, doing whatever habit it is that's holding you back, and you know what that is. Now, the problem with this is it leads to something called neuroadaptation. So let's just forget the fancy word. What that basically means is your mind starts to adapt, your body starts to adapt, and the gremlins that are released from the pain side get stronger, get faster, they get bigger, they call their boys. So what that means is now for you to have the same feeling of pleasure, you need more of the thing that you've done, right? So you need more chocolate, you need to eat out more consistently, you need to find new foods, you need to do it more often. There's just more, right? And the reason you do that is trying to go back to that balance. That is all we're trying to do. And in this process, you'll lead to something called anhedonia, right? Where pleasure senses are so fucked up from chasing pleasure all the time that you don't feel it from doing your normal day-to-day things. You can't take pleasure from the normal activities of a normal human being, right? So how do you actually solve this problem? Is we wait long enough, right? We wait long enough for our brain to readapt to the absence of the drug, the habit, or whatever it is that's causing that big push down, and then you go back to the level of balance. And now when you do that, the cool thing is you get to a point where you can enjoy very simple things. Pleasure and pain is now balanced. So it's just an example, someone sat there looking at a sunset. That's not sending you to the downside, and you don't need to counteract it with feeling like shit, so there's no cycle there, right? So for example, with me right now, I decided to cut out music, I decided to cut out social media, so scrolling through that, I decided to cut out sugary foods, and now I'm getting a lot of happiness from working on my YouTube channel. I'm getting a lot of happiness from training, right? I'm getting a lot of happiness, I mentioned from my last video, reading, right? So there's a lot of things that I'm doing now on a daily basis, even mindfulness, right? Mindfulness, working on my business, like the creative side, because obviously you don't like everything, but What I'm saying is, the normal day-to-day things now are making me very, very happy, or it's keeping me a good pleasure, and I'm not requiring those things like, you know, junk food and drugs and porn and cigs and having to scroll through social media, because I've reached a place and I'm trying to keep a place of equilibrium. Right? It's the most important thing. Now, to summarise this, the reason why you keep going in this circle is this. Watch carefully. This is what is happening to you. You see a chocolate, that represents a chocolate, right? And you eat it. That makes you feel good. Then, as we know, this leads to a pain, because you need to balance it. So balance. So imagine that the gremlins are now released. So what happens from that? You feel sad, right? So you feel sad, and then what happens from there? Feel good again. You go back to the sweet, the chocolate. Now, I want you to replace that chocolate with absolutely anything. The story continues the same way. And by the way, this is not something that's always conscious in your mind, right? You could be playing a shitload of video games, so you feel good, right? To counteract that pleasure, that fast dopamine that's being released, you have to bring it back to balance. And you subconsciously think like, you know what, I've wasted a lot of time, I feel like shit, but you don't really know that you're thinking that. And then because of that, to feel good again, you go back to playing video games. You can literally replace that with anything. The story will ring true in absolutely any condition. Now, the only thing we really need to do is this. Minimize that. Once we take that out, there's no cycle, bro. And you get to a place where everything is balanced.